Emotion, I'll start. People tend to have a certain amount of mistrust concerning anger and are especially uncomfortable connecting it with something like forgiveness. But the fact is that anger and forgiveness tends to be intimately connected. In most cases, we cannot truly forgive until we have dealt with our anger. To put it another way, working through anger is often a crucial step in the process of forgiveness. That makes sense, right? I mean, the whole idea of forgiveness is you feel like that person has taken away something from you. And so obviously you're going to feel angry with that. And so the whole idea is if you want to forgive, then you have to deal with the emotion as well. Stephen? Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'm just tired. Yeah. Yeah. Can you guys resonate with that? Do you guys have any other phrases that you use instead of saying I'm angry? You kind of you don't again, we don't like to use the word angry. So like you kind of dance around it, you use different words. Do you guys have any other words? Okay, tired. Oh, it's just me. It's just me. Okay. Okay. It's just me. You guys have any other different rendition of it? Oh, okay. Just having a bad day. Did you guys ever use when do you think you even use the word I'm angry? Have you guys ever used that word before? Can you think of a time? Oh, Danielle, you can? You can. Okay. Was it pretty when was it? You don't have to tell us. It's up to you how much you want to tell us, but okay, pretty recent. Family member, friend? Okay, work. So you said I'm angry at you? What was the phrase that you used? Oh, okay, okay. That we do that. Okay, that okay, we do that all the time. Okay. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Oh, I'm overreacting. So it's kind of like yeah, it seems like all of it is like it's on me. It's all me kind of a thing. It's just me. Me, I'm kind of yeah. Very interesting, isn't it? So again, you see that that's related to how we perceive anger, right? Because again, why is it that we have such a hard time just saying I'm angry? But if you think like I'm around kids a lot because I'm a pastor, like they say I'm angry all the time, right? They're like I'm angry, like they stole my toy, I'm angry. Yeah, they say that, But again, as adults, it seems like the word anger, um, we're scared to use that word. But again, because I think it's because a lot of us we believe that anger itself is a negative emotion. It's a bad thing. You shouldn't feel anger. Okay, irritated, upset, little mad. Oh, mad. Even mad. We don't use that too much, but anger. So let's continue. Esther. No, no, no. Ashley, sorry. What do you guys think about that? So they said the author is saying anger itself is not a bad thing. However, it's what you do with the anger that will show you whether it was good or bad. Do you guys agree with that? Any disagreements? Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I think this is from another book, but I think the best illustration I saw of anger was because like when on your car, you know how when something is wrong with your car, like an engine light comes on, right? So it's kind of like that's what anger is. Anger is kind of like when you feel like something is wrong, like they either attacked you or they stole something, they took something from you, you expected something and they didn't give you that. It's kind of like something is going wrong, something's wrong, something's wrong. But what we do a lot of times is we try to just change the light itself. Does that make sense? Like we try to turn off the light, or we try to change the bulb, I don't know, the bulb itself, and oh, that's a problem. And so, yeah, I think what you said, Stephen, about like not actually dealing with it the right way, because if there's an engine light, then there's something wrong. We have to go fix that thing instead of fixing the light. But oftentimes, that's what we do a lot of times. Yeah. Very good. Let's continue on. Esther. Right. And so we've all seen somebody go berserk because they were angry. And so again, we see that and we go, okay, anger is a really, really bad thing. But again, just like what Danielle said, there's righteous anger too, right? And then Joanne also talked about Jesus being angry for a righteous reason. So again, not all anger is not a bad thing. The author is trying to say what we do with anger, how we deal with anger. Okay, that's what's going to be whether it's dangerous or not. Let's go to the next part. Anger in the Bible, Joanne. Hmm, that's very interesting. We actually don't think that though, because we normally think, oh yeah, that person never gets angry. That person's always like Zen and Buddha. Like we would be like, oh, like that person's so like patient, and I think we would think that, right? But if you think about it, if they literally lost the ability to feel anger, like if they didn't get angry at like certain things, then that person is probably very indifferent, right? So for example, like if you see injustice, right, that's going on, if you see one human being treat another human being in a very unfair manner, and you look at that and you go, oh yeah, whatever, right? Then again, that tells you more about you as a person, right? Because the fact that you don't have love for a human being, that you're just like indifferent to it, right? So in that sense, that we see that that could be a problem if you actually lose this sense of anger. Does that make sense? Right? Imagine if a car, uh, like cannot sense problems and like doesn't the light doesn't come out, even though that would be a very big problem, right? And so same thing for us in that sense. Okay, who's next? I think Joanne read, and then Danielle. Right. So this is another example, okay, of Jesus getting very, very angry. Lone.
Here again, we see healthy anger serving a good purpose. Jesus uses it to communicate his displeasure to the religious leaders. He also seems to use it to energize himself to push past their opposition and heal himself.
Okay, very good. Paul also wrote some helpful things about anger. So this is what he says. So stop telling lies. Let us tell our neighbors the truth, for we are all parts of the same body. And don't sin by letting anger control you. Don't let the sun go down while you are still angry, for anger gives a foothold to the devil. It could also be translated, be angry, but do not sin. That sentence right there. Don't sin by letting anger control you. It could also be translated, be angry, but do not sin. Okay, so what does this tell us, Stephen? Okay. So once again, this is what we see in the Bible as well, that anger in itself, again, if you think of it like it's a trigger, it's some kind of alarm that tells you, hey, invasion, something is wrong. Like you feel hurt because you felt like they stole something from you or they have done something to you. Okay? So it's a good thing. We need that. But at the same time, we need to recognize it and we need to learn to actually deal with it. But a lot of times what we do is we do it in a very wrong way, whether that's spewing or stuffing or leaking. None of these are good, very good ways. None of these are very healthy ways because they're not actually fixing the problem. Okay. By the way, if you guys are interested, I'll later on the chat, I'll send a book. It's a book about anger. Like the whole book is about anger, and it's pretty good. Or I could send you the Bible study itself, like the PowerPoint, if you guys want. That's a good one. Let's continue on. By the way, any questions so far? Any thoughts? Clarifications? No, go for it. Go for it, please. Hmm. 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 Right. Right. Sure. Sure. Yeah. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Sure. 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 Yeah. Yeah. Well, you're a seven, so that makes sense too. But yeah, yeah, yeah. So I would say, Stephen, I think as long as I think that's not. So I think it's unhealthy if you're like if you still have bitterness towards that person. So I think yeah, there's sometimes where we're super angry, like at that moment, right? And then we put ourselves out of it, and then we look back and we go, oh, I think I overreacted, right? Because I felt like this person, like this is what that person was trying to do. But then you kind of look back and you go, oh, maybe it wasn't a big deal. So you could, so what you're doing is you're forgiving them. You're not. You're basically saying maybe I misunderstood. Maybe it was a wrong, it was a wrong signal. And so because of that, you can let go. But I think a lot of times what we do, and I don't know in your case, but I think what a lot of times we do, we think we dealt with it, but then when we see that person or when we deal with that person, I think we become a lot more cynical, or we put our walls up. So I think in that case, then you haven't really dealt with anger. If anything, you've just hardened your heart a little bit more towards that person. You haven't really dealt with it, right? Yeah. Yeah. So I think that would be a good way to see whether you've actually dealt with the anger or not. Yeah. Very good question. Okay. Let's continue on. So now that we kind of understand, hey, anger is what is anger? And biblically, anger is not necessarily a bad thing. Then how do we understand it? And then how do we actually deal with it? Especially when it comes to our family issues that we have, right? All right. Stephen, why don't you read this for us? Hmm. No. Yeah. Right. So you guys, again, you guys can see how this could be a problem. Uh, like Daniel already kind of admitted to us, she said, I sometimes I have hard time even recognizing that I'm angry. So again, if you have a hard time recognizing it, or you became so used to stuffing it or leaking it again, then, or you put a different name to it, right? Oh, that's not anger. I'm just a little tired. Or it's just a me thing. Then again, you guys see how it could be problematic. Continuing on, Ashley. Hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. So again, well, I mean, I think most of you guys are here because you guys recognize that you need to forgive your parents, right? But again, and this is where the diagnosis, right? We talked about the genogram, we talked about the triangle relationship. These things are all it's going to be very helpful to see, hey, maybe I thought I wasn't angry at my parent, right? Or parents, or my family, or my siblings, but I realize, hey, there's actually these things within me. There is anger, there is bitterness, there is resentment. So again, these are these are things that you have to try to recognize if you want to actually forgive them. That makes sense, right? But again, by the way, this is going to be important because last week, you remember how we talked about how sometimes we blame ourselves, right? So that's also going to be an issue too, right? You guys see that? Because you're only blaming yourself, but then you have to recognize, hey, they have done something to you. But again, you don't think of it like that. But again, your body probably like unconscious, like you're still holding on to some anger. Or maybe again, if you feel like you can't be angry at your parents because that's not a good child. But again, it's in there, right? Not to say that you should be angry at your parents, but it might be in there. And so again, it's important that you recognize that. The more you recognize it, the more you're able to actually forgive. Okay, so let's see anger a little bit deeper. Let's cut it up. Joanne? Hmm. Okay, so when you get angry, okay, there's two responses or two ways. Okay, one is to react. So we don't need to think. That's something that we do naturally. And this is again, we spew or we leak or we stuff. Usually, that's our normal reaction. Or we can stop and we could choose to respond. And that is actually a deliberate thing that we can actually stop and do. Does that make sense? Do you guys understand the difference between reaction and responding? Okay. Long?
Anger is a normal human reaction to such experience as pain, fear, and frustration. When someone does something against us, whether intentional or not, anger is likely to be one of our first and strongest reactions.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's continue. Danielle? Okay, so again, these are the different options that we do have. Okay. Let's go to the first one. The first one is to repress the emotion. And again, some of us, we do this. Some people simply don't feel anger. They have learned, probably from a young age, that it isn't safe, or it simply doesn't pay to allow themselves to experience the emotion of anger. So when it begins to rise up in them, they push it back down, they repress it. But these are the consequences. Number one, poor self-image. Number two, inability to maintain long-term relationships. Number three, self-pity. Number four, holds resentment and then cannot forgive. Number one, what do you guys think people who repress their emotions, why do you think they have a poor self-image? How do you think these things are related? Sure. Okay. Very good. How about self-pity? How do you think that shows up for some people who repress their emotion? Hmm. Yeah, I actually don't know either. I don't, the author put it, but self-pity, that's an interesting one. Yeah. But what's really interesting is that, do you guys know that they say about 70-80% of depression actually comes from anger, right? So and mostly it's because of the repressed emotions, the repressed anger. So it kind of makes sense. I mean, you don't really think about like depression and anger related. If you think about it, it's like you're continuing to deny yourself of the emotion that you have. And so like eventually you just become numb to stuff. And eventually you're just like, I don't care. I don't matter. Like you become very, really, really numb and you have no, desire for anything. Okay, so that's number one. So again, obviously we don't want to do that. We've experienced some of these things as well. Number two, Esther, if you could read this for us. Right. So this is, if number one is one spectrum, repressed, this is the other spectrum, which is vent out, right? Like Frozen, like let it go. Like let it go, don't hold back. Like if you feel emotion, and that's kind of like the more popular message these days is whatever you feel, that's who you are. Like your emotion is your identity. So for example, you hear things like, hey, I don't feel love for this person anymore, so therefore it's unfair for me to stay with this person. I'm being untrue to myself. Again, we're identifying our emotions with ourselves, right? Who we are is my emotions, and so this is the same thing. But again, we've seen this happening before too, right? Because we've seen people like vent out their anger and going crazy and going berserk, and we're like, oh, I can't be friends with that person. All right, let's go to number 3, Joanne. Okay. So the whole idea is instead of, right, because number 1 and number 2, it's usually reacting. But again, number 3 is the idea of responding. So you wait. You give some time. Instead of just reacting, you think about it. Okay, maybe you need to leave the room or go to the mountain, kind of like what Stephen said. Maybe you need a couple of days even. But again, you give a chance for you to, instead of reacting, to responding. Again, this is not very easy. This is very difficult. 원영아, 저 방에서 가주세요. Okay, let's go to the next one. Number 4. Long.
You can learn to confess your anger to someone you trust. First of all, let's get clear about the word confess. At root, it simply means to say the same as, or to give accurate verbal expression to what is real. In this sense, it doesn't carry the connotation of admitting guilt. It simply means you are being candid and honest about what is right.
Yeah. So again, this one is you're expressing your anger to someone. Okay, but you have to be very careful. Okay, so we're going to go a little bit more in detail. Danielle. 원영아, 들어가 주세요. Dot dot dot. Okay. So again, number 1. Okay, it's the point is you want to express your emotions to someone else. Again, this is very very. I think you have to be very careful because I think a lot of times what we do, we might even start off thinking that we're venting our emotions, but in the end, what we tend to do sometimes is gossip about them. Do you understand? There's a difference. One is you're trying to express your emotion. That's totally okay. But at the end, you're venting your emotion, but at the same time, you're trying to say, yeah, that's why this person, you can't trust them, or this person is a horrible person, and this person has hurt me. That's a totally different thing. Does that make sense? So again, you want to do the former, not the latter. Because again, gossiping is no bueno. But again, it's really easy to get there. So you have to be very careful when you are doing this. Danielle? Oh, you did? Oh, sorry. Okay. The healthy way to express anger points to the importance of having a support system of some caring people in your life, people that you can trust and with whom you can be open. Anger that is carried alone will often wind up getting repressed, and it will reinforce your sense of isolation. Talking out your feelings with someone else helps you process your feelings in healthy ways. And so again, this is not easy because most people too, again, when you like share your anger with them, what they're gonna tend to do is like, yeah, that person is horrible, and you feel good because that person is saying that. And so because they said that, you're gonna be like, oh yeah, that person is horrible, and then again, you're gonna get into gossiping. But again, that's something that you want to prevent because that's not going to help you with your healing, with your forgiveness. If anything, that's going to only make the situation worse. Because someone has just confirmed why you should hate that person. Stephen. Yeah. Oh.
Like if I keep the person anonymous,
That's a good one too. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
sometimes like yeah, I'll tell myself I'm not gossiping, but then I want to still say the person's name,
Mm.
and that's not the purpose.
Right. Right. Exactly. Good. That's a good one. So making sure that you don't tell the other person about the name. Yeah. Or reveal. Yeah. Yeah. Or revealing stuff. Yeah. Very good. Very good. All right. Stephen, let's finish it off. The blaze. All right. So again, this is what we normally do. Number one or number two, repress the emotion. So we stuff or leak. Number two, vent the anger. That's spew. Again, both of these options. It's not gonna. It might make you feel better in the short term, but long term, it's not gonna help your relationships. And we've all experienced that. But a wiser action we can do is number three, and then number four. Learn to confess your anger to someone else. Yeah, he does it. I feel like he does it a little too much, like someone else, because he's a counselor. So he promote. Not that I'm not promoting counseling, uh, but yeah, he does talk about like sharing your anger with someone else more, a little more. I feel like. All right. Any clarifications or questions or thoughts that you guys have before we go into our review questions? Mm, sure, sure. Yes, yes. Yeah, sure, sure. Yeah. So I don't think forgiveness necessarily takes care of the anger like immediately. I do think, you could choose. Remember how we talked about how forgiveness is a choice? So we can choose to forgive the debt, but it still hurts. So because it still hurts, there's still going to be anger that you do have, right? So I do think it is going to be a process. But forgiveness, I think, is a step, to healing. Yeah. Of course, yeah, because we do need to recognize our anger first and recognize it well, right? Yeah. So we do need to recognize our anger, what it is that they have taken away. If we, most of, or how did they harm us? And then after that, whatever you feel like the damage is, then you could say, okay, like this is what they have done. Okay, I'm going to choose to let go of the debt. Oh, but you're still going to feel, right? So like, for example, Daniel, if I like took your car out and I totaled it, so the loss damage is your car, right? And Daniel, you might just say, okay, like I know you, so I'm gonna forgive you. Okay, so you don't have to give me a car, you don't have to pay money, but your wallet is gonna be hurting for a long time, right? So you're saying I will take that pain instead. So there is gonna be still that hurt and anger and you know, but it won't turn into resentment and bitterness. But there will be still that hurt and anger. Yeah, sure. So I think if there is resentment and bitterness, I think uh, you have to really see like, did I really choose to forgive this person? Yeah, and then the process. again, it's a process, right? It's going to take that time of like you have to sometimes you have to remind yourself, because sometimes what we do is we play the revenge game, even though we said we forgave, like we go back into that mode, the cycle of, oh, but I wish this happens to them, or like they failed, like things like that. And then we have to catch ourselves, and we got to go, no, I've chosen to forgive them. Like I got it. And also, like, obviously praying for them. I think, yeah, actually praying for them, I think that would be one of the best tools, because if you're starting to say, God, what they did was wrong, they shouldn't have, and I'm angry because they have hurt me, but I don't want them to continue to do that. You're wishing them well, and as you're wishing them well, bitterness and resentment, it's definitely going to, yeah, it's definitely going to help with that process.
I have a question.
Yeah.